I was driving past my son-in-law's house and decided to check on him. But when I saw my wife's car at the gate, a gleaming silver Mercedes that should have been in our garage, my heart tightened with a sense of impending doom. Something's off, I thought, and I quietly approached the window, trying not to reveal myself. What I heard inside shattered and transformed my world completely. Before we proceed, please subscribe to the channel and share in the comments where you're listening from. When the old simpleton finally signs the documents, we'll possess everything we've schemed for. Laura's voice floated through the partially open window like venom coursing through my blood. I sat motionless in my car outside Olivia's house, keys still hanging from the ignition. 10 minutes earlier, I'd called my daughter to surprise her with supper ideas. "Sorry, Dad, I'm not home, but Ryan's there reviewing some legal files," she'd said brightly. Yet here was Laura's silver Mercedes parked boldly in the driveway. I turned off the engine and walked toward the window on unsteady legs. Through the space in the curtains, I could see them plainly. My wife of 30 years relaxing on my daughter's sofa as if she ruled it, and Ryan leaning against the bookcase with that arrogant look I'd come to loathe. "The schedule is ideal," Ryan was saying, his attorney tone sharp with triumph. "Submit in July. Cite irreconcilable differences. With the updated California laws, Laura's eligible for half of all assets gained during the marriage, plus lifetime alimony." Laura chuckled. That light sound I'd once found enchanting. "The building firm alone is valued at $15 million. Include the rental units, the holiday residence, stocks. We're eyeing nearly $25 million altogether." My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, pressing record just as Ryan went on with his legal explanation. "The lovely aspect is his gullible personality. David has no clue we've been cataloging his holdings for weeks. Bank records, land titles, company appraisals, all duplicated already." He pointed to a beige folder on the coffee table. "He basically gave us the blueprint to his empire. 3 years of acting the loyal spouse," Laura said, checking her polished nails, feigning interest in his dull building tales, nodding with fake sympathy when he fretted about salaries. "Lord, the guy truly thinks I care for him." A branch cracked beneath my foot. They both paused in the middle of their talk. Heads swiveling toward the window like alarmed animals, I flattened myself against the stone wall, heart pounding in my chest, perspiration forming despite the May coolness. "Did you catch that?" Laura's voice held a hint of doubt. "Likely just the neighbor's dog," Ryan answered after a moment. "You're overly cautious. Can you fault me if David uncovers this prematurely?" "He won't. The fellow couldn't detect a plot if it flashed in bright lights." Ryan's chuckle contained pure disdain. "By October, you'll be separated, rich, and able to pursue whatever you desire with whomever you choose." I compelled myself to remain concealed until their discussion continued, my phone recording every toxic phrase. When I finally slipped back to my car 20 minutes later, my whole existence had tilted dramatically. 30 years of matrimony, distilled to a tactical meeting between my wife and son-in-law. The folder on that coffee table tormented me. Weeks of scheming, records, readiness. While I'd been laboring 18-hour shifts to construct our tomorrow, they'd been meticulously charting its downfall. I sat in the driver's seat, gazing at my hands gripping the steering wheel. The same hands that had erected a construction dynasty from scratch, that had supplied every luxury Laura relished, that had escorted her down the aisle when her own father declined to join our ceremony. Laura's voice reverberated in my mind. "The guy truly thinks I care for him. The harshest part until 40 minutes ago, I absolutely did." The front door swung open just as I grasped my car keys. Laura emerged first, her luxury purse swinging nonchalantly at her side, followed by Ryan straightening his tie with expert accuracy. Neither anticipated finding me seated in my Toyota, and the surprise showed on Laura's face like a blow. David. Her voice rose a pitch. What are you doing here? I compelled my face into something approaching ordinary, though my pulse roared in my ears. 30 years of marriage had schooled me in reading her emotions, but evidently she'd been performing all along. Just completed a site review nearby. I deceived fluidly, stepping out of the car. Thought I'd drop by and visit Olivia. Ryan moved protectively nearer to Laura, his legal senses activating. Those light blue eyes examined my face with uneasy sharpness, hunting for flaws in my account. She's not here, Laura said rapidly. I was assisting Ryan organize some legal papers for a client. The falsehood slipped from her lips with rehearsed simplicity. How many deceptions had I accepted over the years? Without doubt? Oh. I maintained my tone casual. Chatty? I thought you'd be at the office until 7 today. Didn't you mention something about the Patterson bid this morning? A flash of alarm crossed her features. I departed early. Migraine. Sorry to hear that. I turned to Ryan with fabricated amiability, working on a fascinating case. Asset allocation. He responded without reflection, then halted himself. For a separation client. Very intricate monetary situation. The irony would have been entertaining if it weren't ruining my life. Laura's eyes shifted between Ryan and me, assessing, how long have you been here? David just arrived. Why no cause? But her grin appeared artificial. You seem strained. Everything all right? The woman who'd orchestrated my economic ruin for weeks was inquiring about my welfare. I nearly laughed. Extended day? You know the drill. I motioned toward Ryan. Don't let me disrupt your work meeting. We were just concluding, Ryan said, his hand resting possessively on Laura's lower back. The action seemed instinctive, close. How long had that been occurring? Good timing. Then, I pulled out my phone to check the hour, ensuring they could view the device. Neither responded, but I noticed Ryan's eyes dwelling on the screen. I should head home anyway. Supper won't prepare itself. Laura's laugh sounded strained. I'll be along soon. Just need to finish a few items here. Take your time. I opened my car door, then paused as if recalling something. Oh, Laura. Dr. Anderson's office called about rearranging your checkup. Something about a clash with your job timetable. Her face blanked for a fraction of a second, the expression of someone whose fabrication had been revealed. Then she rallied with remarkable swiftness. Must be a confusion. I'll contact them later. No concerns. These things occur. I slid into the driver's seat, heart thumping. See you both later. As I reversed out of the driveway, I observed them in my rearview mirror. They stood immobile until my car vanished around the bend, then promptly drew closer. Heads inclined in pressing dialogue. The trio of deceit was finished. They suspected I might have eavesdropped on something. I knew they were plotting to demolish me, and all of us were feigning that everything was entirely typical. Laura would drive home separately, equipped with justifications for her early exit from work and her presence at Ryan's house. She'd probably devised a dozen plausible excuses by the time she entered our front door. But she didn't know about the recording on my phone. 50 minutes of clear audio that would alter everything. I merged into traffic, hands firm on the wheel for the first time in 90 minutes. The astonishment was fading, replaced by something chillier and more concentrated. They believed they were engaging in chess with a novice player. They were about to learn their error. The 20-minute drive home blurred with stoplights and automatic reflexes. My Toyota navigated its way into our curved driveway without deliberate guidance, past the groomed landscapes Laura demanded we hire others to care for, past the water feature she'd ordered for our 25th anniversary. I remained in the car for several minutes, staring at the residence I'd constructed with my own hands in 1998. Every plank, every fastener, Every thoughtfully designed element had been a tribute to the woman who was now scheming to take it from me. The front door led into a quietness that felt altered now. Not serene, but empty. Laura's presence had always saturated these spaces with talk about her day. Grievances about neighbors, thrill over fresh acquisitions. Now I pondered how much of it had been an act. The wedding picture on the mantel drew my attention first. January 20th, 1990. Laura radiant in cream satin, me uncomfortable in a borrowed suit. Both of us beaming with what I'd trusted was authentic joy. She'd been 25, employed as an assistant at Patterson & Partners in the city center. I was 40, my construction enterprise finally yielding substantial earnings after 12 years of 14-hour days and quick ramen meals. We'd encountered at the firm holiday gathering that year. Patterson was a customer. I'd remodeled their facilities the prior summer. Laura had giggled at my awful quip about cement blenders, a noise like crystal chimes that made my chest constrict with sudden yearning. When I invited her to dinner, she'd flushed and agreed so swiftly I wondered if she'd been anticipating the invitation. Our initial date at Giovanni's Italian eatery extended until 1 a.m. She listened with real curiosity as I outlined my visions of creating something enduring, something that would survive us both. Her eyes gleamed when I spoke about the homes I aimed to build, the households I wanted to protect. "You're not merely erecting buildings," she'd said, extending across the table to touch my hand. "You're crafting family sanctuaries," I'd proposed 8 months later. The kitchen table displayed our 30th anniversary card from last January, Laura's script still graceful in navy ink. "To my marvelous husband, thank you for realizing all my aspirations. Here's to 30 more years of bliss. All my affection, Laura. All her affection." The words tasted sour now. I proceeded to the family room where Olivia's infant photos adorned the custom shelves I'd made during Laura's pregnancy. July 12th, 1998, the day our daughter arrived. Laura, weary but glowing, cradling our wrinkled wonder as if she'd been destined for parenthood. Those early years had been the most joyful of my existence. Laura immersed herself in motherhood with the same fervor she'd once applied to organizing our wedding. School meetings, basketball matches, elaborate theme birthdays. She chronicled every instant with intense parental pride. "You're the finest father anywhere," she told me the evening Olivia graduated high school, tears flowing down her face as we watched our daughter receive her certificate. "She's going to achieve amazing feats because of the base you provided her." The base I provided her, not we. Had the fractures been evident, even then, I sank into my leather armchair. The one Laura always grumbled was too unattractive for the elegant family room, and allowed the recollections to envelop me. Our 12th anniversary voyage to Hawaii. Laura truly enchanted by the volcanoes and animals. Olivia's university commencement. All of us weeping as she crossed the platform with her sociology diploma. Holiday mornings brimming with mirth and disorder. Laura demanding intricate ornaments that required days to set up and hours to remove. When had appreciation morphed into expectation? When had gratitude for supplying this existence become, "We merit far more"? The recording on my phone contained the response, Laura hadn't cherished me in years, perhaps decades. Every embrace, every milestone festivity, every whispered declaration of love in the shadows had been deliberate, maneuvering crafted to keep me laboring, profiting, amassing riches she could ultimately assert as hers. 30 years of my life condensed to a legal tactic discussion. I sat in the deepening shadows of our family room, encircled by the proof of what I'd believed was a content union, and sensed something frigid and methodical overtaking the sorrow. Laura thought she was executing the extended strategy, aligning herself for greatest monetary advantage while preserving believable denial. She had no notion her spouse had the same tactical intellect that had forged a construction realm from zero. The contest was about to shift. The family room stillness enveloped me as I compelled myself to reason like the entrepreneur I'd always been. When had Laura's conduct transitioned from true collaboration to deliberate alignment? The response arrived with uneasy sharpness. 2. When Harper Construction secured the Patterson City Hall contract. $60 million over 4 years, the biggest endeavor in firm history. I'd returned home that June night, anticipating festivity, perhaps wine. Certainly the eager backing that had upheld me through every past achievement. Instead, Laura had been at the kitchen table with a property guide and a calculator. "This means we can at last afford the estate on Oak Avenue," she'd declared without glancing up. "The one with the sweeping entrance and the infinity pool. The Andersons are listing it for $5.5 million. Not congratulations on the success, not pride in the effort that would hire 400 workers for 4 years, just instant concentration on what my accomplishment could purchase for her. Laura, I haven't even begun the endeavor yet. There's blueprint creation, approvals, vendor talks, but the funds are assured. Right?" She'd finally regarded me then, her blue eyes measuring. "I mean, once you authorize the agreement, the municipality must compensate." The discussion had endured 3 hours. She'd outlined costs to the finest detail. The new estate, yacht club affiliation, premium vehicles, Asian holidays. Not our costs. Hers. The word choices had been revealing, though I'd been too absorbed in project details to observe. By 2023, the requests had intensified. The yacht club affiliation became essential when the Andersons enrolled at Bayview Shores. Our fully sufficient getaway lodge in Oregon became humiliating compared to the Wilson spot in Vail. Laura began hinting about other spouses whose partners truly grasped how to pamper a lady. Karen Thompson's husband gifted her a BMW for their milestone just because he valued everything she'd forfeited for their union. Forfeited, as if upholding my career while residing in opulence had demanded considerable individual sacrifice. The bond with Ryan had strengthened after Olivia's wedding in October 2024. Abruptly, Laura was captivated by court processes, posing theoretical queries about estate splitting and partner entitlements for an acquaintance who might require guidance. She'd begun taking phone calls that prompted her to another room, asserting they were reading group talks or charity group sessions. How many of those calls had been plotting meetings? I retrieved my phone and replayed parts of today's recording. Ryan's voice. "We've been tracking his holdings for weeks." Laura's chuckle. 30 years of portraying the faithful spouse. The tracking made sense now. Laura's abrupt curiosity in my fiscal summaries, her inquiries about enterprise valuations, her demand for shared accounts while keeping her own distinct charge cards. She'd been performing surveillance while I'd been erecting the very domain she intended to pilfer. But Laura had committed a vital mistake in her tactical blueprint. She'd undervalued the man who'd assembled Harper Construction from a loan vehicle and a loaned equipment kit, the same logical intellect that had maneuvered 40 years of building endeavors, worker discussions, and city contracts was now directed at a different sort of issue resolution. They believed they were competing in chess with someone ignorant of the regulations. Laura had devoted weeks aligning her elements while presuming I'd never spotted the playing field. She was about to realize that her spouse comprehended tactics better than she'd ever envisioned. I rose from the armchair and proceeded to my home study where folders holding 40 years of enterprise documents lined custom shelves. Fiscal filings, agreements, collaboration pacts, land documents, everything Laura thought she'd been covertly tracking. But I knew something she didn't. The actual holdings weren't in those folders. I reached for my phone and browsed my contacts until I located the number I required, Nathan Reed, my bookkeeper, my companion, and the sole individual aware of the international setups I'd created years ago for fiscal efficiency reasons. Time to place a call that would transform everything, 4 days of systematic inquiry had converted my home study into a command center. 3 computers hummed softly on the oak desk I'd crafted 20 years ago, their displays showing account summaries, law repositories, and estate logs. Legal pads in blue covered every area packed with sections marked holdings, vulnerabilities, schedule, and advantage spots I'd groomed meticulously that morning, donned my finest gray suit, and put on the spectacles Laura always said made me appear respected. Odd how swiftly mourning could solidify into tactics when you had 40 years of enterprise expertise to utilize. Nathan Reed had been more assistive than I'd ventured to expect. 4 international accounts I'd set up years ago for fiscal streamlining. Entirely lawful, thoroughly recorded, but unseen to anyone lacking advanced auditing abilities. Laura's novice surveillance effort had overlooked the genuine fortune. She'd been listing the apparent domain while the primary valuables stayed concealed, obviously. But Laura had been occupied as well. Her charge card summaries narrated a compelling tale. 55,000 in unapproved shifts over 10 months, channeled to a combined savings profile I'd never established. The recipient name made my jaw tighten. Ryan Fletcher. They'd been establishing themselves as monetary allies long before their separation plot started. Extravagant meals at Bayview Yacht Club, $400 beauty sessions, high-end apparel buys that aligned suspiciously with her reading group gatherings. Every cost depicted a portrait of a woman readying for an alternate existence. The 9th out of $600 purse she'd acquired last Wednesday held specific irony, given that she'd grumbled about food expenses just that morning. Ryan's weaknesses proved even more revealing. My building sector connections had been liberal with details about San Diego's most driven lawyer. The man who aimed to seize my wealth was submerged in obligations. $200,000 in education debts and $10,000 monthly workspace rental selected for appearance over wisdom and an expanding notoriety for skirting moral boundaries when payment timetables tightened. Fletcher's a keen attorney. Mark Patterson from Patterson Materials had informed me over tea, but he's got luxury preferences on a modest income. Owes 4 of my vendors almost $30,000 combined. Always vows payment next month and then vanishes when the invoices arrive. The State Bar Organization's site disclosed 3 rejected moral grievances in the past 18 months, all concerning customer fund mishandling, rejected but noted. In law communities, even failed grievances left marks on career standings. I reclined in my leather seat, surveying the data collected over 96 hours of patient probing. Laura and Ryan had misjudged their adversary disastrously. They'd viewed a trusting spouse who toiled long hours and seldom queried household costs. They'd neglected to acknowledge the logical intellect that had developed Harper Construction from a single vehicle into a $15 million venture. The phone sounded. Pulling me from my tactical contemplation, Olivia's name appeared on the display. "Hey, dear." I kept my voice affectionate. Typical. "How's your day progressing?" "Dad, I need to inquire something." Her tone bore the cautious impartiality she employed with distressed clients. "Is everything fine between you and Mom recently? There's been this odd strain whenever I'm near both of you." My grip strengthened on the phone. How much did she comprehend? How much had Ryan disclosed to her about their scheme? What prompts you to ask? "Minor details. Mom seems anxious about finances, which is peculiar since business has been thriving. And Ryan keeps posing strange questions about your firm's setup, like how the alliances function and who manages which holdings." She hesitated. "It feels like they're seeking data, but I can't determine why." Seeking data? My daughter's sociology education had spotted the predatory conduct her mother and husband believed they'd concealed. Probably just interest in how the corporate realm operates, I said cautiously. "Your mom's always been concerned with economic stability." "Maybe." But Olivia didn't sound persuaded. "Dad, if something was amiss, I mean truly amiss, you'd inform me. Right?" The query lingered between us like a charged device. Inform her what? That her mother was scheming to ruin me economically, that her husband was directing the entire plot, that the family she'd relied on her whole life was constructed on falsehoods. Of course, dear, but everything's okay. Just the usual corporate stresses? After we disconnected, I sat gazing at my inquiry notes. Ryan had been extracting details from my daughter about my firm's setup. The extent of their data collection operation was wider than I'd grasped. Time to ensure they received precisely the data I wanted them to possess. I was still digesting Olivia's alert about Ryan's probing mission when my protected phone line rang. Rachel Lee, my bookkeeper for 15 years, her voice crisp with career competence. David, I've prepared the holding safeguard papers for approval. When you noted wanting to refresh inheritance planning, I took the initiative to investigate best frameworks. A pause. This is beyond inheritance planning, isn't it? How insightful of you. 30 years in detailed accounting instructs you to interpret subtleties. Should I inquire what sort of risk we're shielding against? The household variety. Rachel's quiet conveyed much. She'd managed 4 separations from my building team leaders. She knew the terrain. I'll have everything set by afternoon, she said. The enterprise holdings will be fully protected from any individual legal moves. Whoever's aiming at your personal finances won't even glimpse the actual funds. By 11 a.m., I was seated opposite Paul Reynolds, head of Central Bank, and my tennis companion for 20 years. The oak meeting room scented of tea and hide, known ground where I'd bargained numerous building loans. Profile safety assessment, I said, pushing papers across the smooth table. I need all combined entry points confirmed and briefly suspended awaiting identity verification. Paul's brows lifted mildly. This is thorough. David, every combined profile, credit extension, and automated transaction system. Every one. May I inquire? You may not. But I grinned when I expressed it. How long for the safety restrictions to activate? Instantly upon your approval. All profile owners will get notice that entry demands in-person confirmation with photo identification and additional proof. Paul examined my face. This is going to inconvenience Laura considerably. I'm relying on it. The safety restrictions engaged at 12:15 p.m. just as Laura was settling for her regular meal at Bayview Yacht Club with 4 other building spouses. My phone vibrated with the initial rejected deal at 12:30 p.m. Emma, I was examining vendor offers when Laura's alarmed call arrived at 1:20. David, something's faulty with our profiles. My card was rejected at the meal, and when I phoned the bank, they mentioned there's a safety restriction. Do you know anything about this? Flawless naivety. No reference to the combined profile with Ryan's name. No recognition of the absent $55,000. No confession that she'd been transferring funds without my awareness. Safety restriction. That sounds grave. Did they indicate what initiated it? Something about confirming identity and profile entry. It's humiliating. David, I'm seated here with Karen and Lisa and Megan, and I can't even cover my own meal. The anguish in her voice was authentic, not because her scheme was endangered, but because her social position had been openly undermined. After 30 years of matrimony, I knew Laura's priorities. I'll contact Paul Reynolds right away, I promised her. We'll resolve this. But I didn't contact Paul. Instead, I drove to the building location where my team was laying base for the new health facility. The known noises of equipment and labor voices felt stabilizing after 4 days of monetary conflict. My phone buzzed with messages throughout the afternoon. Laura, 1:50 p.m. Still can't enter any profiles. This is absurd. Laura, 2:40 p.m. Paul Reynolds' assistant says he's in sessions all day. What kind of bankhead is too occupied for his top clients? Laura, 3:30 p.m. Even our crisis credit extension is suspended. How am I supposed to purchase food? Each message delivered a stern contentment. For 30 years, Laura had assumed economic safety, while I toiled 70-hour weeks to deliver it. Now, she was encountering what it felt like when that safety disappeared abruptly. Ryan's response proved even more captivating. At 5 p.m., my private detective, Alex Ramirez, called with an update. Fletcher attempted to enter his shared profile with your wife 4 times this afternoon. When that failed, he tried to extract funds from what seems to be a trust profile, likely your daughter's learning fund that he oversees. That one's suspended. 2. Per your directions. His manner, furious phone calls to bank agents, warnings about legal moves, demands to converse with leadership. Classic overassured lawyer finding his influence has vanished. By 6:30 p.m., I was home assessing the day's monetary arena from my study. Every shared profile suspended. Every combined credit extension halted. Every automated transaction system needing my personal endorsement. Laura's entry to 30 years of gathered wealth had been diminished to whatever currency she held in her bag. The safety steps were fully lawful. A spouse safeguarding marital holdings awaiting inheritance planning assessment. Paul Reynolds would affirm that standard banking rules had been adhered to exactly. But Laura and Ryan would grasp the communication flawlessly. The man they'd intended to economically surprise was no longer on defense. My phone rang at 7:15 p.m., Laura's number. But the voice that responded would be frantic now. Not controlling. Time to observe how rapidly schemers betrayed each other when their schemes began collapsing. The evening safety officer at Fletcher and Partners scarcely glanced up as Laura hurried through the entrance at 7:45 p.m., her shoes tapping urgently on the tile floor. I knew this because Alex Ramirez had stationed himself in the cafe across the road with a clear sight of the building entry. The frantic call Laura had made from our driveway. "Ryan, we need to discuss now. Something's gone horribly awry," had been audible enough for our adjacent neighbor to overhear. Not that Laura cared about caution anymore. On the 15th floor, Ryan's edge office shone with crisis meeting strength. Through his window, anyone with optics could see 2 shapes bent over a meeting table strewn with papers, their physical language shouting, "Emergency control! He knows!" Laura's voice traveled through the structure's older air system to the bookkeeping firm adjacent where Alex's associate kept an office. David knows something and he's blocking everything. "I couldn't even purchase fuel for my car." Ryan's reply was keen, career-oriented. His dispute voice involved, "The timing isn't random. 4 days ago, you said he appeared unexpectedly at Olivia's house right when we were debating tactics. He must have overheard something." How much could he have heard enough to comprehend? We're not fooling around. Papers shuffled as Ryan examined documents. "Laura, we need to presume he recorded our discussion, so everything we said about holdings, schedule, tactics, all of it possibly noted." The quiet that ensued spoke volumes. 2 schemers realizing their target had been multiple steps forward while they'd praised themselves on their intelligence. "What do we do?" Laura's voice had forfeited its prior assurance. "We speed up everything. No more slow method. No more cautious alignment." Tuesday morning, I submit for urgent separation proceedings with instant partner aid. We assert David is participating in economic mistreatment by limiting your entry to marital holdings. Economic mistreatment. Laura's tone heightened with curiosity. "That sounds legally persuasive." Ryan concluded, "We depict him as a dominating spouse who employs money to control and frighten. The suspended profiles become proof of his abusive habits. Not protective tactic. More shuffling papers, the noise of an unlawful mind shifting into complete assault mode. I'll need you to note examples of psychological mistreatment, monetary dominance, frightening methods. Reflect on your marriage. Anytime David made monetary choices without consulting you, anytime he queried your expenditures, anytime he used money to affect your actions, that's going to be challenging. Ryan David's never been dominating about money. If anything, he's been overly liberal. Then we reinterpret liberality as control. His supplying for you becomes evidence that he generated economic reliance to sustain dominance. Every present, every extravagance, every comfortable life selection becomes confirmation of his methodical separation tactic. The astonishing boldness was remarkable in its range. They were planning to arm 30 years of David's commitment and liberality, distorting every gesture of affection into proof of mistreatment. "What about Olivia?" Laura asked. "She's not going to instinctively side with me. Her sociology education makes her doubtful of everything." "That's actually ideal." Ryan's voice bore the contentment of a man who'd discovered his final plea. "Olivia's reluctance to back you right away becomes evidence of how completely David has controlled family interactions. We align her sociology education as something David utilized to pit his own daughter against her mother's psychological needs. You want to turn our daughter into a witness against her father. I want to preserve your economic future." Laura. Olivia's career education means her statement holds additional significance. If she voices any worry about family interactions, we shape it as specialist sociological view, verifying David's controlling habits. The scheme was refined in its thorough malice. Convert the daughter's career doubt into proof against the father. Reinterpret every gesture of affection as control. Transform protective monetary safeguard into confirmation of mistreatment. Tuesday morning. Ryan proceeded. "I submit for urgent protective orders blocking further holding shifts, instant partner aid of $20,000 monthly, and temporary sole use of the marital residence. By Friday, we'll have him portrayed as an abusive spouse who requires judicial oversight to stop additional monetary frightening. And if he resists, then we heighten harassment accusations if he reaches you directly, pursuit claims if he probes our actions, psychological mistreatment assertions if he doubts any of our charges." Ryan's voice bore cold contentment. The elegance of household mistreatment law is that rejection becomes proof of fault. The stronger he battles, the more dominating he seems. Laura's chuckle held no warmth. "Poor David. He has no concept what he's released. 30 years of portraying the gullible spouse. Time to show him that kind individuals end last." They devoted another 90 minutes harmonizing their accounts, setting up safe interaction methods, and readying for what Ryan termed complete legal combat. Every dialogue, every exchange, every monetary deal would be noted as proof of David's methodical mistreatment pattern. The scheme had advanced from basic holding seizure to personality destruction drive, aimed to ruin not just David's finances, but his standing, his bond with his daughter, and his position in the society he'd assisted construct for 4 decades. As Laura finally departed the building at 10 p.m., her phone was already vibrating with Ryan's initial tactical message. "Recall. You're not a furious spouse anymore. You're a frightened sufferer, finally gathering bravery to flee your abuser." The conflict had formally commenced. Sunday morning discovered Laura and Olivia at Café Soleil, the diner where they'd enjoyed monthly mother-daughter meals for 6 years. Laura had selected their customary edge table, personal, secluded, perfect for private talks. But this time she'd aligned herself as a woman pursuing her daughter's career assistance, rather than motherly backing. "Olivia, I need to discuss your father with you." Laura's voice bore meticulously measured fragility. I think something's amiss with him mentally." Olivia placed down her teacup with the intentional accuracy she used when transitioning into counselor mode. "What kind of amiss?" "Mom. Dominating actions. Suspicious reasoning. He's been limiting my entry to our profiles, asserting it's for safety reasons." But Laura allowed her voice to fade, permitting her daughter's mind to complete the voids. "How long has this been occurring?" "Months, perhaps longer. I just credited it to job tension, but yesterday, he entirely blocked me from every profile we share. I couldn't even purchase a meal. Olivia leaned ahead, her sociological education activated despite personal engagement. Mom, monetary dominance can be a type of household mistreatment, but it can also be valid fiscal oversight during corporate changes or legal issues. What's Dad's justification? The query was too straightforward, too career-neutrally. Laura had anticipated sentimental backing, not analytical review. He asserts it's standard profile safety, but Olivia, I've been wed to him for 30 years. This isn't standard, this is penalty for something. Penalty for what? Laura paused. How much could she disclose without revealing her own scheme? I think he doubts I've been doubting our union. Maybe he's attempting to frighten me into remaining... Mom. Olivia's voice bore the tolerance of someone who'd spent years handling controlling clients. Are you telling me Dad is economically mistreating you to block separation? Or are you telling me you're contemplating separation, and Dad is safeguarding holdings? The difference sliced too near to reality. Laura altered approaches. I'm telling you that your father has been showing worrying action shifts. And as a sociologist, I thought you might have perspectives about what's transpiring. As a sociologist, I'd say that major action shifts usually have recognizable initiators. What happened 4 days ago that might have prompted Dad to abruptly limit profile entry? Laura's thoughts raced. Olivia was too skilled to accept sentimental control without proof. Every query exposed the inconsistencies in Laura's sufferer story. I don't know what initiated it. That's what terrifies me. But Olivia was examining her mother's face with analytical separation, interpreting tiny expressions and spoken discrepancies with career expertise. Mom, are you requesting sociological guidance, or are you requesting me to pick sides in a marital dispute? The direct query demolished Laura's control tactic. Her daughter wasn't going to supply the sentimental backing that would confirm her sufferer story. I'm requesting you to assist me comprehend what's happening to our family. Then I recommend you have a candid discussion with Dad about his worries, instead of requesting me to analyze him based on your view of his actions. Laura departed the cafe 30 minutes later. Enraged at her daughter's career separation and concerned about the consequences, if Olivia declined to automatically endorse her mother's assertions, the sufferer story would fall under career examination. Meanwhile, 50 miles away at Harper Construction's main office, I was obtaining intelligence that would reshape the whole arena. Mark Patterson's call arrived at 10:45 a.m. Just as I was assessing weekend location reports, David thought you'd want to be aware. Ryan Fletcher's got issues developing with the state bar organization. Word is they're probing his management of vendor payments on the Thompson case. What kind of issues? 4 vendors submitted grievances about non-payment last month. Fletcher gathered charges from his customer, but never allocated payments to the workers. Classic trust profile breach if they can verify it. I set down my tea, mind instantly computing the consequences. How severe? Severe enough that the bar organization arranged a session for next week. Fletcher's rushing to locate $28,000 to compensate the vendors before the probe ends. $28,000. The precise sum Ryan owed. According to my inquiry. Mark. Would those vendors be willing to talk about their encounter with Fletcher if someone from the building community contacted? Definitely. These folks are angry. Fletcher vowed payment for 7 months, always had justifications, always faulted delays on his customer or judicial processes. They're minor operators who can't afford to take those deficits. I spent the next 4 hours placing tactical phone calls. Carlos Rivera from Rivera Wiring, who'd been awaiting 9 months for $8,500. Tony Kim from Kim Pipes, owed $10,000 since last November. Gary Nelson from Nelson Covers, still awaiting $7,000 from a task finished in December. Each dialogue followed the same format. Career courtesy contacts from Harper Construction, verifying references before possibly employing Fletcher for legal assistance. Each vendor keen to share cautions about Ryan's payment habits, moral shortcuts, and career undependability. By 2 p.m. I had noted proof of Ryan's methodical pattern of utilizing customer trust profiles as personal financing, breaching state bar rules, and deceiving vendors about payment schedules. At 3 p.m., I called the state bar organization's moral complaint line. I'd like to submit a formal grievance about lawyer misconduct. I informed the reception expert. Ryan Fletcher has engaged in a pattern of customer trust profile breaches and has made deceptive statements to building industry experts. The grievance form requested detailed records. I supplied vendor names, sums owed, schedule of deceptions, and proof of Ryan's methodical misuse of customer funds. 4 extra vendors consented to act as witnesses, if necessary. By 5 p.m., Ryan's law office was getting calls from the bar organization about accelerated probe methods and required session presence. His career standing, the base of his scheme against me, was now under formal moral evaluation. At 5:15 p.m., my phone vibrated with a message from Alex Ramirez. Fletcher just exited his office carrying 4 boxes of folders, heading toward his vehicle. Want me to trail? No need, I responded. I know precisely where he's heading. Ryan would be driving directly to Laura, panic surpassing his usual prudence. The scheme that had started with assurance and meticulous planning was about to become a frantic struggle for endurance. Let them fret. Let them err. The true conflict was just commencing. 3 days of career crisis had given Olivia time to process all she'd discovered. The drive to Harper Construction's main office felt like journeying toward a confrontation she'd been evading her entire adult existence. My office structure stood firm against the May sky. Stone and metal and sincere craftsmanship, everything Ryan's modern tower feigned to be but wasn't. Megan, my assistant for 10 years, welcomed Olivia with the warmth saved for family who actually appeared at locations and firm events. He's awaiting you. Sweetie, proceed directly. I stood when she entered, interpreting her physical language with the cautious focus I'd learned from observing Laura's moods for 30 years. But Olivia held herself differently. Career stance, analytical space, the demeanor of someone who'd made tough choices. Dad, we need to address what's transpiring between you and Mom. Her voice held the careful impartiality she used with troubled clients. I've spent 3 days evaluating the circumstance, and I need to grasp your viewpoint. What's your mother informed you? That you're displaying dominating actions, monetary control, possible psychological mistreatment. She sat opposite my desk, hands clasped exactly. She wants me to endorse her sufferer story, using my career qualifications. The analytical terms were startling, coming from my daughter, but I recognized her tactic. Distance herself sentimentally to assess facts impartially. And what do you believe I believe Mom attempted to control me the same way she's evidently been controlling you? Olivia's blue eyes, so similar to Laura's, but somehow purer, studied my face. Show me the proof, Dad. I need to hear what you heard. I wavered. Once I played that recording, there would be no shielding her from the reality about her mother and husband. But Olivia was 32 years old, a certified sociologist, able to manage truth. I pressed play on my phone. Laura's voice filled the office. When the old simpleton finally signs the documents, we'll possess everything we've schemed for. Olivia's expression remained unchanged for the first 2 minutes. Career separation endured as she listened to her mother ridicule 30 years of matrimony, heard Ryan compute legal tactics for maximum economic harm, absorbed their cold debate of schedule and holding allocation. But when Laura said 30 years of portraying the faithful spouse, Olivia's poise fractured slightly, her hands tightened. Once then loosened, the recording concluded silence extended between us like a connection neither desired to traverse. First, how long have you known? She inquired finally. 7 days. I overheard this discussion at your house last Wednesday, and you've been constructing a defense tactic while feigning everything was typical, something like that. She reclined in her chair, processing. Mom requested me to assess your mental condition. She wanted me to offer career opinion that you were showing abusive habits. What did you tell her? That I couldn't ethically evaluate someone without appropriate assessment, that her assertions seemed inconsistent with your established action patterns. Olivia's voice carried a note of anger now. She tried to use my education as a weapon. Dad, against you and against career standards. The burden of betrayal, not just mine, but hers, settled between us. I'm sorry you've been pulled into this. Dear, I'm not... Her tone sharpened with determination. I'm glad I know the reality. The question is, what occurs now? I studied my daughter's face, seeing resilience I'd helped forge, but autonomy I couldn't direct. That's your decision. Olivia. I won't request you to select sides. I already have. She rose. Choice made. I choose reality over family devotion. I choose proof over feeling. And I choose to back the parent who didn't attempt to control my career ethics. Relief surged through me, followed promptly by worry. What about Ryan? What about him? Her voice went frigid. My husband joined in a scheme to economically destroy my father while using my sociology practice as disguise. That union is finished, Olivia, Dad. I'm not making this choice in fury. I'm making it based on personality evaluation and action proof. She moved toward the door, then halted. I'll testify truthfully about family interactions if required, but I won't be anyone's tool, including yours. I understand. Good, because there's one more thing I need to do. She departed my office with the resolute step of someone who'd found ethical clarity in a situation crafted to demolish it. 30 minutes later, she'd be entering her own residence to confront the man who'd betrayed not just me, but the career ethics she'd spent years forging. I sat alone in my office, surrounded by the proof of 40 years of honest labor, and felt something I hadn't experienced since this ordeal began. Hope that reality might actually count. Olivia's key turned in the lock at 8 p.m., and Ryan's surprised expression showed he hadn't expected her home prematurely. He lounged on our living room couch, legal papers scattered across the coffee table, a partially empty scotch bottle nearby. We need to talk, I declared, placing my bag down with deliberate accuracy. Tough day. He didn't glance up from whatever file he was pretending to examine. The Carson testimony got delayed again. I know about the scheme. Ryan. His head jerked up. The careful lawyer's facade slipped, revealing something desperate below. What scheme? The one where you and my mother planned to economically demolish my father while using my sociology credentials to back false mistreatment allegations. I stayed standing, keeping superiority. I heard the recording. Every word. He set down his scotch glass with exaggerated composure. Olivia, I think you're misinterpreting. 30 years of portraying the faithful spouse. Sound known, the color left his face. Ryan Fletcher, who could debate cases before the state high court, abruptly looked like a man observing his world fall. How much did you hear? Everything. Holding allocation tactic, schedule, your charge computation, mom's act evaluations. I sat across from him. Maintaining career distance. Was our whole union part of this plan? 4 days later, Laura learned that social ruin advanced quicker than judicial processes. The Bayview Yacht Club's dining area hummed with Sunday meal chatter, but groups of women quieted as she neared their tables. Karen Anderson, her poker companion for 6 years, became absorbed in her omelet when Laura stopped to greet. Lisa Patterson alleged an urgent call rather than proceed their talk. By the time Laura arrived at her usual table, she grasped that the scheme had become common knowledge. Laura, dear, Megan Crawford's voice bore false kindness. We missed you at the organizing group session yesterday. What session? I wasn't notified. Oh, didn't you receive the note? We had to make some structural adjustments. You comprehend Laura was starting to identify the pattern. Phone calls ignored, Invites withdrawn, social entrances shutting with murmured effectiveness. Meanwhile, I executed my own drive with substantially more triumph. 40 years of straightforward dealings had gained me trustworthiness that no legal maneuvering could eradicate. My meal with Paul Reynolds at the bank proved tactically fruitful. I shared worries about family troubles with just sufficient detail to establish truths without seeming revengeful. Laura and our son-in-law apparently formulated troubling plans concerning our holdings. I noted over tea, "I've had to enact protective steps." Paul's reply was precisely what I'd anticipated. Career comprehension blended with personal compassion for a friend coping with family disloyalty. The Business Association board session that night proved equally beneficial. When Mark Patterson inquired about Laura's absence from the recent charity supper, I explained with true sorrow about union difficulties that have surfaced. "Sometimes you learn people aren't who you assumed they were," I said, permitting disappointment to appear. 3 years of union, and it turns out she was scheming. Well, I'm thankful I discovered when I did. By Monday evening, Laura's social separation was total. The yacht club affiliation group scheduled a standard review of her status. The philanthropy board accepted her withdrawal from roles she'd never tendered. Ryan's career collapse hastened beside Laura's social banishment. 4 major customers ended associations, citing concerns about discernment and moral criteria. The Anderson Enterprises profile, worth $250,000 yearly, sent a formal note expressing lack of faith in advisors' career judgment. Laura's frantic Monday night call to Ryan bore desperation I could hear through their residence's slim walls. "Everyone knows Ryan. Everyone. I can't appear anywhere in this city. We'll submit urgent requests Tuesday morning. Compel David into protective stance. Before what? Before you forfeit your law credential. Before I relocate to my sister's residence in Arizona." Their mutual blame meeting endured until 1 Two schemers learning that shared culpability wasn't the same as shared resolutions. Tomorrow would deliver their final frantic ploy. I was prepared. Tuesday morning found Laura in Megan Hawthorne's city center office. A separation lawyer whose notoriety for destructive tactics had earned her both fame and elevated charges. The glass meeting room overlooked the judicial building where Laura hoped to ruin me. But the lawyer's expression suggested restricted hope. "Mrs. Harper, I've examined your materials." Megan's voice bore career doubt. "Your husband's monetary protective steps appear legally valid. Combined profile holders have rights to limit entry during marital strife. But it's economic mistreatment." Laura's desperation seeped through her sufferer character. "He's controlling every facet of my entry to money we accumulated together." Money he accumulated according to fiscal records spanning 30 years. Megan consulted her notes. "Your earnings contributions appear negligible. You haven't been working outside the home since 1992. Laura's face reddened. Being a homemaker had symbolized extravagance and safety. Now it appeared as proof of reliance. What about psychological mistreatment, frightening tactics? What specific events can you note? The query lingered in the air. Laura had spent restless nights attempting to build credible mistreatment patterns from 30 years of David's authentic thoughtfulness and liberality. He's dominating about money. Always has been. Can you supply instances of threats? Physical frightening? Separation from relatives or companions? Well, no. But Mrs. Harper, household mistreatment cases demand proof. Has your husband ever threatened you bodily? Blocked you from exiting the residence? Tracked your interactions? Each query punctured holes in Laura's invented story. David had never elevated his voice in fury, never limited her pursuits, never doubted her friendships. 12 blocks away, Ryan learned that bar organization probes advanced with administrative competence when they sought responses. Tuesday morning's ethics group call bore implications beyond vendor payment postponements. Mr. Fletcher, We've obtained extra grievances regarding your handling of customer trust profiles, specifically claims that you've been employing customer funds for personal costs pending case closure. Ryan's hand tightened on the phone. Those claims are baseless. I've always upheld proper bookkeeping. We have records from Rivera Wiring showing bills submitted 9 months ago with vows of payment pending customer endorsement, yet your customer resolved 7 months ago. Where are those funds? Presently. The response was his personal banking profile, where vendor payments had been redirected to cover workspace rent and education debts. What had appeared as ingenious cash management now seemed as misappropriation. There may have been office delays. Mr. Fletcher, we're arranging a formal session for Friday morning. You'll need complete fiscal records for all customer profiles dating back 24 months. By Thursday evening, Laura and Ryan had attained the desperation that breeds hazardous choices. Their crisis tactics session in Ryan's almost vacant office felt like commanders planning an ultimate assault with no supplies. We have to submit household violence assertions, Laura declared with false assurance. It's the only way to force him into protective position. Laura, false household violence claims are serious offenses if we are discovered, given the proof he probably possesses. What proof? I've never uttered anything in front of recorders or observers that would contradict. She halted, recalling the recording that initiated this cascade. The recording confirms we were planning monetary tactic, not noting his mistreatment. So, we reshape it. Your legal knowledge, my sufferer statement, make the story about long-term psychological control and monetary dominance. Ryan gazed at her across the meeting table. 7 months ago, she'd been a weary homemaker seeking thrill. Now she was suggesting falsehood in court. If this collapses, we're both facing criminal accusations. If we don't attempt, I'm facing destitution and you're facing license revocation anyway. Laura's voice bore the computation of someone who'd lost everything except the capacity to drag others down. At least this way we descend battling. Friday morning's protective order session would decide whether their desperate attempt succeeded, or whether they'd simply supplied David with more scheme proof. Neither grasped their opponent had spent the whole week noting every phone call, every frantic meeting, every falsehood they'd told to attorneys and companions. David Harper wasn't just protecting himself anymore. He was constructing a prosecution case. The San Diego County Judicial Building felt different on June 5th, as if 40 years of honest standing had solidified into something concrete I could carry into combat. Judge Elizabeth Monroe oversaw a family relations court with straightforward competence, having witnessed every type of family deceit possible. Laura sat at the accuser's table with Megan Hawthorne, wearing the meticulously chosen attire of a mistreated wife, modest gown, subtle cosmetics, anxious demeanor that might have been real given the risks. Mrs. Harper? Judge Monroe started, reviewing the urgent protective order request. You claim your husband has participated in economic mistreatment and frightening. Can you describe specific events that led you to fear for your well-being? Laura's voice quivered with rehearsed fragility. Your Honor, for months my husband has been limiting my entry to our profiles, tracking my expenditures, making warnings about what would occur if I attempted to depart. What kind of warnings? Mrs. Harper, monetary warnings. That I'd be left with zero. That he'd use his enterprise links to demolish my standing. Laura halted for impact. Last week, he entirely cut off my entry to money, even for essential needs. I observed my wife of 30 years falsify herself with growing assurance. Each falsehood built upon the prior one, creating imaginary mistreatment from a man who'd spent decades delivering every comfort she'd required. Judge Monroe turned to my lawyer, Robert Patterson. Does the defendant wish to reply? Robert stood with calm authority, gained through 35 years practicing law without encouraging falsehood. Your Honor, we have proof that Mrs. Harper's assertions are not only untrue, but part of an intentional plot to defraud the defendant of marital holdings. That's a grave charge. Advisor, we have audio capture of Mrs. Harper and her accomplice, Ryan Fletcher, scheming this exact situation 7 weeks ago. Laura's face paled. Megan Hawthorne murmured urgently in her client's ear, but harm reduction was impossible when your whole case was built on deceptions. I'd like to present Exhibit A, Robert continued, linking his phone to the courtroom sound system. Laura's voice saturated the room. When the old simpleton finally signs the documents, we'll possess everything we've schemed for 50 minutes. Judge Monroe listened to the complete plot unfold. Laura's ridicule of our union, Ryan's legal tactics for holding capture, their computed plan to control Olivia's sociology qualifications. The guy truly thinks I care for him, Laura's recorded voice proclaimed with casual harshness. I watched my wife's invented sufferer story crumble live. Her coached statement about fearing for her well-being became ridiculous when contrasted with her recorded chuckle about controlling the old simpleton. Judge Monroe halted the recording. Mrs. Harper, do you have any reply to this proof? Laura's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. Megan Hawthorne's face had gone ashen as she realized her client had used her to submit fraudulent court papers. Your Honor, Megan said cautiously, I request approval to withdraw from this case. I was not advised of these conditions when I agreed to representation. Request approved. Judge Monroe fixed Laura with the gaze she reserved for liars. Mrs. Harper, I'm rejecting your protective order request with bias. Furthermore, I'm forwarding this matter to the prosecutor's office for probe of possible falsehood charges. The hammer fell with decisiveness that echoed through the courtroom. 3 weeks later, the separation agreement reflected Laura's monumental misjudgment. Her noted deceit eliminated any entitlement to partner aid, and the premarital pact she'd overlooked, signed eagerly in 1990, limited her to negligible holding split. Ryan's law credential suspension became lasting cancellation when the bar organization uncovered $150,000 in absent customer funds. Last I heard, he'd relocated to Kansas and was working as a legal assistant. Olivia submitted for separation the day after the session, citing irreconcilable differences. She's developing a new practice focused on family counseling with particular knowledge in identifying control patterns. 7 months later, Laura works sales at the same shopping center where she once spent my money on premium goods. The irony isn't lost on either of us. I rebuilt Harper Construction standing firmer than before. The community's backing during my family troubles translated into fresh agreements and stronger enterprise bonds. The residence feels altered now, calmer, but truthful. No more staged talks or computed fondness. Just the sound of wind on windows I built with my own hands in a home that's finally mine again. Laura had been correct about one thing. I really had believed she cared for me. Now I know the distinction between care and act. If you enjoyed this tale, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts on this tale in the comments. To hear the next tale, click on the box on the left. Thank you for viewing.